and go to different classrooms, and the professors who are assigned to these particular groups, they will be meeting with you and talking to you about the program we have prepared for you this year, because we have students who are at the prep year, Arabic prep, Turkish prep, and then MA lessons, and then MA thesis writing, PhD coursework, PhD comprehensive exam, and those who are at the stage of writing their PhD thesis. So for each group, we assigned advisors to closely work with them, and we'll go to our respective classes after this talk and meet those professors there. Yes?
After the talk, you will talk for an hour for introduction, and then we will separate.
Okay. All right. All right. So I invite. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to invite Professor Alparslan Açıkgenç to make his speech.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajat, for this nice introduction, some of which I don't deserve, but thank you very much. Today I will be talking about scholarship, actually, and the title, How to Become a Scholar, actually, it means, I would maybe say, on the way to scholarship, rather than this will be probably a good topic also for the beginning of the academic year to discuss. What made me to talk about this is actually a work which a few years ago I came across, but actually it was published in 1947 by Franz Rosenthal, called The Technique and Approach of Muslim Scholarship. So as I was also interested on this topic, from time to time I gave talks on this. Usually I talked about principles of scholarship. So I decided to talk on this and then share my ideas with you. I am sure you will also contribute for my talk. Now, scholarship has primarily two aspects. The first one is what I call the material or technical aspect, and the second one is the qualitative aspect, and I am more concerned with that one, not with the first one, but more with the other one. But let me give you examples for the first one, and these I have chosen primarily from Rosenthal's book, because his approach is more in that way. He's not much concerned about the qualitative aspect. Perhaps his second book, if you are familiar with his works, is very much related to the second aspect. He has another book called Knowledge Triumphant. I don't know if you read this book or not. This pays attention to the qualitative aspect, paying of course more attention to the concept itself, the concept of knowledge, which is the tool of scholarship, right? So the first thing to discuss as far as the material aspect is concerned, and especially he gives examples from Islamic civilization, notebook versus memory. Because in Islamic civilization, in the way of scholarship, the emphasis is on the memory. not on the writing side, taking notes. Of course, it's not neglected, it is emphasized. There is a famous story, which you might have heard, I am sure. Al-Ghazali himself tells this, that when he was traveling, once he came across the caravan was blocked by the thieves, haramis, and then he has his books moving from one city probably to another one. And then when they took his books, he told them, please, you don't have any use for these. As far as you are concerned, these are not worth much. So please give my books and you can take anything else you want. Of course, these, they don't know what to do. They went and they asked their chief. They said, well, there is a man like this and he has some books and he doesn't want us to take them. What should we do? And then he says, bring him to me. When he went there, and then he said, so you are an alim, a learned man? He said, yes. And this is what I am studying. He said, if I take these books, do I take away your knowledge? He said, yes. He said, then you are worth nothing. Because by taking the books, your notebooks, you lose your knowledge. So that means you are not a learned person. You have no knowledge at all. The knowledge is outside, not within you. And he said, this guy gave me a very good lesson. So, but then they said, okay, take your books and go because we don't want to take your knowledge. So he left, but then he went and he, excluded himself from social life and he started memorizing all those books. And put them all into memory, he said. I put them all in my memory, and as a result, this gave me a very good opportunity to have the knowledge within myself, not outside myself. So perhaps, I don't know if this has anything to do with it or not, in the scholarship, memory was very important. It was very important. My own professor used to teach at the University of Chicago, Professor Fazıl Rahman. He himself, of course from the young age, because he was used to memorization, when he read a book, it was as if he really memorized it. He would keep in his mind. He had a very strong memory. And many times when we asked him something, I mean, he would tell us 10, 20 books with their contents, with their page numbers, and what it was inside, which he said he read about 25 years ago. So you can see the memory. It was it's a tradition, so it was very important. In modern times, parrot-like memorization was not accepted in education. It was excluded as a result of that. Today, especially, in many places, this memory is excluded from scholarship, which is a great loss, actually. It is a loss as far as scholarship is concerned, because as that Harami was saying, then you need the knowledge outside, not within yourself, whereas you are supposed to assimilate, everything. So this is one material aspect that is important, so I decided to talk about that. And of course, by writing, then you come up with books, which even Jama'ah, for example, says these are the tools of the scholars. So this is another thing that, of course, manuscripts, and today, especially for us, this is important. For Rosenthal, it has something special, manuscripts, because at his time, as you can see in the 40s, many of the books were not printed. They were, so if you look in his bibliography here, and as well as in the other book, Knowledge Triumphant, you can see that more than half of his books are manuscripts, not printed books. But today, a lot of them are printed already, so gradually coming out. But you see, when you compare, we would say that in the Muslim world, the books in the libraries, maybe only 10-15% of them are printed. Many of them are not printed yet. So we have to study and see, study of manuscript becomes very important. The other thing, respect for the written documents. This is very important also, because if you don't pay respect, obviously you will not preserve them, you will not multiply them, you will not pay attention to study and so on. And then of course another thing as far as scholarship is concerned is the language. The usage of the language is very, very important also, that you need to be very precise. The concepts you choose are very important, and where you choose them, how you combine them, and so on. And the critique also very important. You know, you don't have to criticize, but you need to have the critical approach. This is very important. So without the critical approach, it's hard to develop new ideas. And finally, the citations. This is much more technical aspect, all of which I'm sure you know already. So I just pass. And of course, the way when you look at the old manuscripts, the way they are composed are not like the way we compose the books today. So you know, we have more the table of contents, the indexes, and so on and so forth. Now, the second aspect is the qualitative aspect of scholarship. For this, I have chosen two examples. One from the West. I don't know if you heard the School of Charters in the Middle Ages. Bernard was one of the significant philosophers in that school. They usually, in the olden days, today this is not so much common, when they had an idea, some scholars would express them you know, in the form of poems. So he wrote a poem, how to become a scholar. He said, you need a humble mind, zeal for learning, a quiet life, silent investigation, poverty, and foreign land, namely travel. So these are the significant, the essential ones. Can you imagine, I mean, today when you go to many places, they will say that there cannot be scholarship with poverty. You need wealth. I will try to read some examples also. You see, the understanding of scholarship could be different from one tradition to another. But of course there are many similarities also. As human beings, we influence each other, but on the other hand, you see our traditions are different, so as a result we develop different attitudes, different conceptions also. In fact, let me read just one sentence here. For example, when Rosenthal is trying to explain why he wrote on this issue, he says the main purpose of these notes is to show the similarities of and differences between Muslim and Western scholarship. You see? So that means they don't have to be the same. There are differences. You cannot avoid that because they have a big, you know, knowledge tradition behind them, and that creates differences. But on the other hand, we are all human beings. You know, we have the same systems. We utilize the same, you know, systems and faculties. So as a result, obviously, there will be also similarities, but similarities are not only based on these tools. At the same time, we may influence each other. As a result, we can borrow from each other, and those, of course, will be also similarities. Now, you can see the same poem by Al-Juwayni, saying more or less the same things in Arabic. He says quick mind. He doesn't say humble mind. Zekaun, actually, the way he translated. This translation is George Macdissy's translation. Both of them are. The first one written in Latin. The second one is written in Arabic. Okay?
Translated by Macdissy?
Yes. Yeah, both of them. Zeal, so quick mind is zeka. Since we use in Turkish also, you'll know. Zeal, poverty, he also says poverty. So if you're rich, most probably you'll not be a scholar. Most probably, we don't say 100%, of course, there are exceptions. There are very rich scholars also. And foreign land, you know, the Arabic is very good. Zekaun wa hirsun wa iftikarun wa ghurba in the Arabic. So zeka, hırs, fakirlik, fakru zaruret in Turkish, and gurbet. Bunlar şart. These are the conditions that a scholar, because you know, talabul ilm is very famous. They travel in search of knowledge in every tradition, whether in the West or in Islamic civilization. This is something as even in Greek civilization. You know, scholars travel because to collect, to learn, you know, more, to collect more knowledge. And he says a professor's inspiration, and a life of long span. But telkin-i ustaz, bir ustazın telkini. Telkin, of course, is here teaching, in other words. It is also important, you know. The teacher is also important. But then he says a life of long span. That you know, knowledge requires devotion. It requires devotion. So scholarship also requires devotion that you need to spend. In fact, in his other book, Rosenthal's, if I could remember, I will bring it. He has another poem that was written by, according to him, the person who quotes it is the person who quotes it, the singing girls, yani Hasaisul Etrak, onu yazan meşhur. Jahiz, Al-Jahiz. Jahiz is the one who quote this. He says, I will give you the translation. Rosenthal quotes him also in his Knowledge Triumphant at the beginning. He says, knowledge is something to which, if you devote your whole being to it, it will give you only some part of it to you. Only some part. And if you don't devote yourself completely to knowledge, knowledge will not give itself to you, even part of it. And even if it gives you part of it, you still are not sure whether you received is true or not. Can you imagine this devotion, right? This is a very good poem also. Actually, he quotes, he says, this is what my teacher, his teacher was Nazam. He used to say this to his students, that you have to devote your whole life on the way of knowledge, so that you can get a little bit learning. Because knowledge is really something that we can never outrun. It's like a big treasure. Now this, of course, leads scholarship to develop an ethics, an approach for learning. And I say that in this endeavor there are primarily three elements. Number one is knowledge, obviously. And if the scholar or the teacher that we try to learn from, we can express him as the carrier of knowledge, that he brings us the knowledge. And then the one who pursues knowledge is the student. So the scholarship is an activity that takes place with these three components, these three elements. And so because of this, most scholars in their discussion of scholarship, they touch upon these topics. Now, all these three elements are complementary, because complementary means if only one of them is missing, then it's not complete. You cannot say, well, I have the two, no need for the third. They go together, so they cannot be separated. And the devotion continues between all the three. So the devotion of the student who's to become a scholar is not only for knowledge, but also for the carrier of the knowledge, namely his ustaz, his teacher. So, and therefore, you know, he has a respect, and lifelong relationships are usually established. They contact each other, and their relationship does not end when the teaching ends, when they receive their diploma and so on. So each component of scholarship is conceived in a peculiar way, depending on the tradition. But again, there are quite similarities between the traditions in this understanding. Of course, these similarities also important. It could be by influence, by learning from each other, and so on. So the most important element among these three is knowledge, obviously. Knowledge. So because of this, whenever we talk about scholarship, we always talk about knowledge, al-ilm. And this is the case as far as Rosenthal is concerned, and I'm sure there are other scholars also in the West, in other traditions, who wrote on this issue. And also in Islamic tradition, I have chosen a few books who wrote on this issue. They always put knowledge at the center. So why? Because that is the goal. That is the goal, that goal of scholarship, to attain that knowledge. So because of that, they try to tell, now here, the things that we say about knowledge are actually, as far as scholarship is concerned, you know, we are not interested in the content of the knowledge itself. In a sense, we might say the ethics of knowledge, you know, the significance of knowledge, why it is important, why should we learn, perhaps explaining that. So in most traditions, this is especially the case as far as Greek civilization is concerned, because they are perhaps the first ones who said that knowledge is pure goodness. Of course, here we translate Sophia as knowledge, but you know, what they meant is wisdom, actually, the highest type of knowledge, in other words. So it is pure goodness, hayrun mahdun in Islamic tradition also. It was taken. So pure goodness means it has no evil in itself, no bad aspects in itself. And because it is good, when someone has knowledge, that knowledge beautifies that person. So, zinatun in embellishment in this book. That is the way he tries to explain. And from time to time they refer to earlier writers also. Like here, he has one quotation from Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib. He said, he also expressed in the way of a poem, poetry. So I will try to translate this. He says, we are content with what God has given us. In fact, from his treasure, he distributed things. What he ordained to us is knowledge, and what he ordained to our enemies is wealth. This is very interesting. رَضِينَا قِسْمَةَ الْجَبَّارِ فِينَا لَنَا عِلْمٌ وَلِلْأَعْدَاءِ مَالٌ. Wealth, material wealth. So, and then he says, the person wrote a commentary on this. He says, why did he say like that? He says, because knowledge is eternal. It is continuous, it doesn't end. So therefore, when the alim dies, when the scholar dies, with the death, he comes back to life. He actually becomes alive. But when the person who does not have knowledge, he dies, with him, his wealth also dies. Because he cannot bring the wealth with him. But since the scholar leaves knowledge behind, people will continue using that. He has books and so on. As we study, all the books that left before us, we are still studying them. So because of that, knowledge is always pure goodness. It is expressed in that way. Now, because it is pure goodness, it is sought for its own sake, not for any material gain. Now, again, this is a tradition in every civilization. I don't know if you heard this or not. I think as far as Thales is concerned, they tell a story. There's a story. I think Aristotle also mentions this, that one evening he was trying to watch the stars, right? And as he was watching, because he looked in the sky all the time and walking this way and that way to see their movement or observe, and he couldn't look, and then he fell into a ditch. And there was an older lady watching him, what this crazy man is doing, and she started laughing. And he says, that's why it is knowledge which makes her laugh, actually. But then they told her during the day, they said, are you crazy? Look, you know so much, but look at yourself. You have nothing, no wealth. And then he told them, well, with my knowledge, if I want, I can be richer than you. But we are not after material wealth. But they didn't, of course, believe him. They just, continued to look down upon him. What he did was, then he started studying the weather conditions. And as you know, Thales used to live near Izmir today, on the Aegean coast, Ionia at that time, right? And what he did, he saw, the weather conditions, and he predicted that in the following year, the weather will not allow the olive trees to give lots of olives. So the olives were very cheap, of course. He started buying olives, collected olives that year. And he accumulated that. And then the next year, since actually the weather went bad and they didn't have any olives. very few. As a result, the olive price went very high. And he started selling his olives. And you know, within 1 month, he became very rich because he sold very expensive and olive oil also. So because of that, he said, now look, you see how rich I am. You see how did I become rich? Because of the knowledge. And if I want, I can keep this wealth. But I prefer knowledge. The money is yours, and he distributed, he gave all the money away. You see, that is why, because knowledge, this is extremely important, especially in Greek civilization and of course in Islamic civilization as well. The Greeks emphasize it very, very much. That knowledge is not for material gain. It is sought, of course, wisdom, Sophia, for its own sake only. Because it gives you the best thing, and that is virtue. So that is why, remember their definition in Socrates, he says, knowledge is virtue. It is virtue. So this is also one thing that is important on the way to scholarship. There is something, this is expressed very much in Islamic civilization and in Western civilization also, since the teaching methodologies were not so much developed in the Greek civilization. They don't express it, but I'm sure they must have had it. That knowledge is mercy, but it's not clemency or leniency. This means that, you know, within knowledge itself there is mercy, but you should not be merciful to the student. You know, if the student makes a mistake or commits an error and so on, you cannot say, as we do in Turkish universities, well, you know, I caught him in cheating, but let's forgive him for this time. Even for one time, you cannot forgive him. Because, you see, in scholarship, there cannot be any leniency. Because it kills scholarship. That is why. It's very, very dangerous. Now, as far as this is concerned, in the West, in Western civilization, as I know this by experience in the US, for example, they had absolutely, you know, if you are caught, if you made a mistake, even if you are a professor, you will be kicked out of the university. Your life is finished. I mean, scholarship life is finished. You cannot continue as a scholar anymore. This is like plagiarism, you know, this, anything moral, a moral mistake. So that is why in knowledge there is no mercy. In scholarship, that you cannot have any mercy. If the student, you know, is not studying, it is in this book it is emphasized also, you know, that it's very interesting. When I went very fast, and says laziness. Laziness cannot be next to knowledge. Here, so this is the same thing, I'm sure, in many traditions. Now, why certain things I express in different ways, like I say knowledge is unity. By this, I don't mean let's unify all knowledge. I mean this thing, that there is only one truth in knowledge. Only one truth. Now, because there is unity on the basis of the fact that there is only one truth, it doesn't mean we don't allow any differences of opinions. You know, because sometimes there are theories in scientific studies, in scholarship, theories are very important also. And when knowledge is at the stage of a theory, we cannot know whether it is true or not. So because of this, we should be open for criticism. Even if you are a scholar, you should be open for criticism. But again, of course, we develop ethics of criticism. You know, how you should criticize your colleague, how you should criticize your professor, you know, how you should criticize someone else. This is extremely important. Last year, I noticed one of Ottoman scholars, Ahmet Avni Konuk, who comes actually from the Mevlevi tradition, and his grave is next to us here in the graveyard. He criticizes Nicholson because Nicholson, as you know, he translated Mesnevi from Persian into English, all of it actually, excellent translation, by the way. But from time to time, he accuses Mevlana of pantheism. And Ahmet Avni Konuk criticizes him that he misunderstood Mevlana. Pantheism is something else, Wahdatul Wujud is something else. They are not exactly the same, and he gives, of course, his, this is not our topic, he gives his reasons for this. You know, he develops his arguments very well. He's a very good philosopher, actually. But the language is, attracted my attention. I was so much, I affected the language he used in the Ottoman language. He says, for example, Nicholson Beyefendi, Hazretleri, even he's using that in his excellent work, and he praises him. That so good translation, and he praises his scholarship also. But he says, unfortunately, in one place he misunderstood him, and then he goes on into his reasons for misunderstanding. So even the ethics of criticism, very important. But of course there are many different possibilities, different approaches. Sometimes when you look, people don't really pay attention to this. Let me not give names. Some examples came to my mind, but maybe we should mention it. But you see, when they are too harsh when they criticize, they accuse. They don't criticize, they accuse. Accusation is not criticism. This is unfortunately common in Muslim world, especially today. What they say, okay, he is kafir. This is not criticism, this is accusation. Criticism means you go on the idea, criticize the idea itself. Or you say, well, this is stupid, he didn't understand the topic. Now, this is disrespectful. And you are not criticizing, right? So this is very important to develop also an ethics for this. Now, another thing, trusting the carrier of knowledge is very important. Because if you do not trust your teacher, obviously whatever she told you, you will take with suspicion. Now, if you are suspicious, then your attitude towards knowledge is also suspicious. Now, this will affect you psychologically, obviously. Psychologically. As a result, whatever the professor is giving, it will automatically, because of that psychology, your mind does not record it. You don't get anything. So, critical attitude is different. Not trusting, these are also different things. So the trust is very important in knowledge. Again, because of the professor or the teacher has, because of his knowledge, we respect him, her. But this respect, again, does not prevent us to sustain our critical attitude. This is also important. Now, something came to my mind to give as an example from Islamic civilization. The knowledge tradition developed different characteristics of knowledge. In Islamic civilization, this you can see very well. The number one proposition is that true knowledge is with Allah. إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. This is very common. Most scholars would say that. If God has the knowledge, then He may reveal this knowledge, and He does this to the prophets. Now, the purpose of this kind of knowledge, which is the highest knowledge, it is considered as the highest knowledge. Its purpose is guidance, and the guidance is given by a special methodology, and it uses the light of the heart, and the main principle is tajdeed, renewal, and its language is different. It affects the heart more. It's not scientific language, okay? And therefore it is light, and it enlightens. It addresses all humans from all different levels. Doesn't make any distinction. And this knowledge is granted by divine grace. Some of this you will find in Western tradition also, especially in the Middle Ages. Today, Western tradition is quite different. I don't know if we should call it Western tradition or maybe global tradition today that dominates the whole world. We all utilize that tradition, and it therefore left, the approach developed in the medieval times in the West. Many of them are left behind. So, if you have all of these attitudes in the mind, then you come up with an hierarchy of knowledge. Hierarchy, which means some knowledge are more important than others, and therefore they have priorities. And because of this, you will see, I am sure, take Al-Ghazali, for example, they divide knowledge like knowledge which is compulsory to everyone, knowledge which is compulsory to only some people. If some people learn it, that is sufficient. But there is some kind of knowledge that it is not everyone should know. So, and what is that? That is the revealed knowledge. The revealed knowledge. This is, and therefore it is the highest and the most important, and it enlightens all other knowledge. It enlightens. It gives guidance to all kinds of knowledge. The guidance, the mental guidance, frameworks should be shaped by that kind of knowledge, so that the scholars will also lead people, they guide people. Scholarship is not just for any purpose, just not for the sake of learning for yourself, not for yourself, but also guidance, guiding the community, guiding the student, and so on. So the second kind of knowledge is the knowledge of the ulama, of the scholars, the learned men and women at the same time. Now, this knowledge is based primarily on the first one, if it is derived directly from that one. Directly from that one. At the third level comes scientific knowledge. Scientific knowledge. You see, one type of knowledge higher than the other one, one level up, guides one level down. Okay? So if you follow this in a chain, continuous chain, you will end up at the highest level knowledge, which guides all of them, namely revealed knowledge. That is the one that guides all of them. But if you look more directly, then you can say the revealed knowledge first guides the type of knowledge which is derived from itself. Now that derived knowledge guides scientific knowledge, and scientific knowledge guides intellectual knowledge, and intellectual knowledge is supposed to guide the common knowledge that all people have at all levels. But of course, eventually we say it is actually the first one that guides all of them, because the light comes from there, and it is the divine light. Now, this is the way it is understood also in Western civilization, but maybe expressed in different ways, and especially in the medieval times. Today, Western tradition totally excludes, and in fact they deny hierarchy, as you know. Maybe the attitude is changing now, but I know when I was there studying for my PhD, in all philosophy departments, if you use the word hierarchy, you are out. They will immediately, they don't, all considered at equal level. So hierarchy wasn't, they didn't like it at all, they hated it for some reason. I don't know, because it took my attention, that's why it's, you know, it made a remarkable impression on my mind. I would notice this all the time. So I would try to avoid using the term hierarchy. But today probably it is changing. It is changing. So this is all I have to say. If you would like to make any comments, I'm most welcome. Thank you very much.